On YouTube, it is All Things Mets Media, and this video is going to be the 5 storylines of the Mets going into spring training. Let's get right into it. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Now let's get into the first storyline. We got Francisco Alvarez, and how is he going to perform in the spring training? This is his rookie season, really coming in. Last year, he had a cup of coffee with the New York Mets. That big situation with the Atlanta Braves. He just, really couldn't handle it. But this season, Francisco Alvarez is also healthy because he had an injury last year. So he's healthy now. He's good to go. Now, there's been a lot of talk about Francisco Alvarez and whether he's going to be the DH, whether he's going to be on the roster, whether he's going to get a chance. We saw what happened in 2019 with Pete Alonso, and we saw, there was talks about Pete Alonso being in AAA, but the Mets ended up bringing him up to the majors in 2019, and guess what? He became Rookie of the Year. Now, Pete Alonso, 2019, he was not going to be the first baseman for the 2019 New York Mets. It wasn't going to end up that way. He earned that spot, and that's what the Mets ended up doing. They ended up going with the smarter player. They could have, had a year in free agency with Pete Alonso more, but they decided, no, we want Pete Alonso to play now. And guess what happened? He became Rookie of the Year. He hit 53 home runs. So great job on him, Pete Alonso, But this is about Francisco Alvarez. And honestly, his journey. Francisco Alvarez is the number 2 prospect in all of the MLB pipeline. This guy is, not so great defensively, but offensively, his power, he has probably the best power of any prospect in the New York Mets system, and that's in the system. And even in the MLB pipeline, there's been talk about Francisco Alvarez. He's the number 1 guy for power, and the Mets, they lack power, and in 2023 they need Francisco Alvarez to perform. If they're going to give him a chance. If they're going to give him a chance, I think Francisco Alvarez is going to hit bombs for the New York Mets. That's really one storyline going into the, the spring training for the New York Mets. And, like I said, Francisco Alvarez had a cup of coffee, in the last season. And he had 12 at-bats. He hit, 167, had 1 home run. It is what it is, but I really like Francisco Alvarez. I think he's the one of the Mets' future prospects, and we'll see what happens. I think this year you're definitely going to see him. You're going to see Beatty, so we'll see what happens there. But let's get into the second storyline, and that is going to be who is the Mets DH going into 2023. And there's a lot of people you can talk about. You could talk about Darren Ruff. You could talk about Daniel Vogelbach, from the lefty side, and righty side, Darren Ruff. And they also got Tommy Pham as well. So Francisco Alvarez also pans out, if he performs very well in spring training and they decide to bring him in to the roster and have him as the DH, then, we'll see. But, man, Daniel Vogelbach, did not have a good, really Mets 2022 with the New York Mets. His first game, he hit a home run, and then after that, he just struggled. He just wasn't hitting for more power. And that's what the Mets got him for. They got him to hit for power. So Daniel Vogelbach, just really couldn't cut it for the New York Mets. He couldn't be consistent, and that's what the problem was. Daniel Vogelbach could not be consistent. And also Darren Ruff, they brought Darren Ruff in, and Daniel Ruff was a guy that hit lefties, destroyed lefties, and guess what he did? He, disappointed the Mets as well. So I think definitely Daniel Vogelbach and Darren Ruff should not be the DHs of the New York Mets going into 2023. I think Tommy Pham should definitely get some consideration. This guy played with 2 teams last year. He had a good year. He could hit for power. He has some speed. He could play the outfield, So I think Tommy Pham is definitely going to be a big piece for the New York Mets in 2023. But power-wise, Daniel Vogelbach, there's been talk about him, he put less weight on him. He's been working out more. I don't know if that's going to help him, but I hope it does, because we need Daniel Vogelbach to be better than he was in 2022. And Darren Ruff, a guy that analytically he kills lefties. That's what he does. Darren Ruff kills lefties. He is on the older side, but the Mets have him for 1 more year. And we will see what happens with Darren Ruff, but I think Darren Ruff is really not the best answer for the New York Mets. I think Tommy Pham definitely should be looked at as the DH as well. Francisco Alvarez would be my DH. If I'm going for a young team, I know that the Mets want to win now, and I understand that completely. But Francisco Alvarez, what he has brought to the table, in 2023 could be very substantial to the New York Mets, future and their power. And we know what Francisco Alvarez does. He hits for power. And that's what the Mets really need. So I don't think it's that simple, because Francisco Alvarez is a rookie. And, he hasn't really seen a lot of major league pitching. And it's going to be a lot of adjusting and that type of stuff. So then the third storyline, we got Kodai Senga. And Kodai Senga, man, the Mets very surprised me when they picked up Kodai Senga. I did not think that the Mets were going to get Senga. I know that the Mets needed, a rotation pitcher. And, after losing, DeGrom, so many people, Ty-John Walker, Chris Bassett. But, man, the Mets getting Senga, it was very big. Was a big surprise, actually. But this guy throws 100 miles per hour fastball. He has a wipeout splitter. His secondary pitches aren't so great, but we really don't know what Kodai Senga is going to be yet. We don't know how he's going to adjust in the MLB. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. But I think Kodai Senga is going to be a very talented pitcher in the major leagues. He's also younger. He's not as old as, other pitchers in free agency. So Kodai Senga, a guy that throws 100 miles per hour, has that wipeout splitter. I think he can definitely be successful. And, just think about like Ty-John Walker, but a way better Ty-John Walker, especially with that fastball, 100 miles per hour. That's really a good pitch, and he could learn to use it. He could learn to strike out hitters. And yeah, man, he is not going to be in the World Baseball Classic as well, but we'll get to see him in spring training, hopefully, if everybody stays healthy. Kodai Senga needs to stay healthy, but it's going to take adjusting. It's not easy. There's guys like Ohtani, Suzuki from the Chicago Cubs. It takes time to adjust to the MLB. And Senga is going to be a dark horse for this New York Mets team. We really don't know exactly what he's going to be, but I think Senga is going to be a big piece for the New York Mets, definitely for the next 3 to 5 years. His contract is 5 years. So I like Senga. I like what I see from Senga. We will see what happens, honestly, man. Let's get into the fourth storyline, man. And now we got Starling Marte. Starling Marte had a really great 2022. His health-wise, at the end of the day, he got hit by a pitch on his pinky, and he just really couldn't play to his full potential, in those playoffs games. And, hats off to Starling Marte for playing very, very well. In the playoffs, he tried his best. He did his thing, but it just really did not work out. He was hurt. And the Mets, I know that they wanted to win, but bringing in a hurt player like Starling Marte, even a hurt player was better than a lot of players that the Mets had. So, great job on Starling Marte. But he had a surgery in November, and that there's been talk about Starling Marte not being able to start spring training, or not being able to be in the World Baseball Classic. Now, the World Baseball Classic is in March. Spring training is in February, late February. So, I think Starling Marte, the best thing is the Mets want him healthy. You want him healthy. You want him to be your right fielder. This guy has a rocket arm, great speed. Brandon Nimmo is the center fielder for the New York Mets, and Starling Marte is supposedly going to be the right fielder. I just hope he stays healthy. I think that the Mets need to be, cautious with Starling Marte, and, maybe not allow him to play in the World Baseball Classic in March, because you want Starling Marte to be healthy for the 2023 Mets season. World Baseball Classic is like 8 games. It's a great spectacle, great event, but having Starling Marte for the 2023 season is going to be very important for the New York Mets. Now we got one more storyline, and that's Brett Baty. Will he win the third base, job? Will he win it over Eduardo Escobar? Brett Baty, first at bat, in the MLB, he hit a bomb in the Atlanta Braves system off Jake Odorizzi off that curveball. And Brett Beatty, man, I think definitely he's a guy that has a future. You know, when Carlos Correa, all the signing, all that stuff about Carlos Correa came up, Brett Beatty, you know, he didn't get discouraged. In the offseason, he trained with Troy Tulowitzki, who was a former Yankee, former Colorado Rocky, former, Toronto Blue Jay. And definitely, Brett Beatty training with that type of guy, that's going to improve his defense. And, there's been talk about Brett Beatty's defense not being so great. But if he's doing everything he can to improve, that's what you want to see. Offensively, he looks to be better than Eduardo Escobar. So he has, Brett Beatty hits the ball all the opposite field. He can hit a home run. He can pull the ball. Defensively, he's getting better. So I think Brett Beatty definitely has a chance to win the job over Eduardo Escobar. Now let's talk about Eduardo Escobar. Eduardo Escobar, this is his last year with the New York Mets. It's his contract year. He's going to be very motivated to perform for the New York Mets. And in the playoffs, Eduardo Escobar, he performed pretty well. In September, he had a really good September. That last month of baseball for Eduardo Escobar was really, really good. So at the end of the day, you want Brett Beatty to be the Mets, third baseman for the future, because when they got Eduardo Escobar, he was just supposed to be a bridge, to Brett Beatty or Mark Vientos. And Mark Vientos, it doesn't look like he's going to be the future third baseman for the New York Mets. He still has a chance, to be the third baseman. But Brett Beatty, it seems the Mets really want Brett Beatty to be the Mets, third baseman. So we'll see what happens, man. But those are the 5 storylines going into spring training for the New York Mets. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment, subscribe. And yeah, guys, you guys are awesome. I love GM for life.